This week's blog pushes the geekometer off the scale.
The Star Wars films, above all other film sagas, inspired me to become a filmmaker. Now, my original plan was to review Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which has recently been re-released in 3D. However, since there are already many scathing reviews out there on the interwebs, my opinions wouldn't really add anything new, nor be as funny as them. Besides, my enjoyment of Star Wars Episode 1, even now, is tempered by the knowledge that one particular scene had a major influence on me becoming a filmmaker in the first place: the pod race. The pod race in The Phantom Menace is a beautifully constructed sequence, combining terrifying speed, stunning visual effects, and excellent sound design. An oddity among Star Wars action sequences, it is perhaps the only time a sequence involving vehicles is not a chase or a battle. This changes the dynamics of the scene. One character is not pursuing another, the aim is not to intercept. All the characters are racing towards a common goal, victory, and the spoils that come with it. While the original trilogy of Star Wars films dealt mostly with fantasy and myth projected into a science fiction universe, the prequels rely much more heavily on historical events for inspiration, particularly those surrounding the Roman Empire. Senates, emperors, chancellors, all can be found at the heart of the rise and fall of Rome. And the concept of pod racing itself is derived from chariot racing. Perhaps the most famous chariot race ever captured on film is that of Ben Hur, and it doesn't take you long before you start to see the similarities and, in some cases, the blatant theft of ideas from Ben Hur used in the pod race sequence. Firstly, both races feature a multinational grid. Now, Phantom Menace does a better job here of distinguishing different races because of the design of the pods, and their drivers are more varied, and sound also plays a huge role in distinguishing one pod from another. Next, both races are presided over by a tyrannical leader.
To the best of these, the crown of victory.
Both races are heralded by a fanfare. In both races, the action travels left to right the majority of the time. Also, both races feature an antagonistic racer, who the hero must defeat. In Phantom Menace, this is Sebulba. In Ben Hur, it is Masala. The antagonists cheat to win, and both directly try to kill the hero. Once the actual racing gets underway, the number of similarities between the two sequences is striking.
Look, here he comes.
In Phantom Menace, the horses have been swapped for engines, the speed dramatically increased, and the setting made much more hostile. It truly is a case of faster, more intense, and this is to the pod race's advantage. Ben Hur's chariot race cannot compare to the sense of speed of the pod race, even though it shows the penalties for failure much more graphically. Instead, it shows the speed as being more relentless. In both races, we visit certain parts of the track multiple times to give a better sense of progression. The advances in technology in the 40-year gap between these films is to the Phantom Menace's advantage too. A combination of live action, miniatures, and CGI create an intense sequence where the camera is freed to move in extremely difficult ways with ease. The shaky camera work, though, keeps the pod race grounded in a sort of reality. This is one of the reasons why the pod race is more immersive, but what truly makes the difference is the sound. In Ben Hur, the sound design is somewhat limited by the realistic nature of the world. The horses, the crowd, the drivers' voices, all are used in a fairly matter-of-fact kind of way. In The Phantom Menace, the sound design is emotive and immersive. Because it's science fiction, it can get away with more. We feel threatened by Sebulba's pod. We hear the sound bouncing off the walls of the canyon. We can almost hear the speed. The music too is used particularly well to underscore the most dramatic moments of the race. The editing too seems tighter on the pod race. Over the years, the pace of editing has steadily increased, and this, again, helps to increase the sense of speed, and is used to manipulate our emotional response to the sequence. Notice how many cuts there are when we think Anakin is in trouble. Now compare that to Ben Hur. However, if the pod race is technically superior, conceptually superior, and orally superior, why does the chariot race in Ben Hur still hold its appeal? Let's take a look at whereabouts we find each sequence in its respective film. In both races, the hero wins the race and a fanfare heralds their victory. Now in Ben Hur, this happens at 2 hours and 35 minutes in, over 3/4 of the way through the film. The pod race, however, ends at 1 hour and 6 minutes, only a shade over halfway through the film. I'm sure many people would have been happy for it to be the finale sequence, rather than the car crash cacophony of the actual final act, a place where this gets intercut with this. And this. And this.
I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
For all its technical wizardry, the pod race is not a finale in the same way the chariot race is. In fact, it doesn't mean anything at all. In Ben Hur, Judah is racing to beat Masala, his old friend turned enemy, and to become accepted by the Romans despite being Jewish. In the Phantom Menace, you could argue that Anakin is racing for his freedom from slavery, but this is a deal made without his knowing, and he only finds out about it after the race. In any case, his so-called slavery doesn't seem too bad at all. He has a job, he lives in a condo with his mum, he has friends. In actual fact, Anakin is racing for money, to win money, and even though he's doing it to help Qui-Gon and Padme, he has little to no emotional attachment to either yet. His mother isn't being held hostage, Sebulba hasn't really done anything to warrant revenge, and him and Padme have yet to fall in love. He has no real reason to subject himself to this near-death experience. Contrast that to Ben Hur, in which Judah races for revenge against Masala, the man who banished him to a slave galley, imprisoned his mother and sister, supposedly let them die, all for an accident that happened decades before. The real poignancy of the chariot race comes afterwards though, when Judah visits Masala, who, having been mangled by their crash during the race, then at least partly redeems himself by revealing that Judah's mum and sister are in fact not dead, but have contracted leprosy.
Where are they? Look for them in the valley of the lepers. If you can recognize them.
Everything up to this point has built towards the race, but once revenge has been taken, not without a certain amount of regret on Judah's part, the revelation spins the action into a different direction. Now the film is about redemption and saviour. The chariot race, and more so its aftermath, is a plot point, changing the course of the story dramatically. In Phantom Menace, the pod race is a beautiful but ultimately pointless excuse for 9 minutes of stellar action. This lack of emotional motivation is what is going to make the pod race fade into the obscurity of film history, while the chariot race of Ben Hur is likely to be held aloft for decades to come as great storytelling told in a compelling way.